Let's look at what's been going on in that wonderful bastion of culture and normality. And if only we were more like the French, you know, the cry of the Ramona throughout the years. Wonderful, wonderful France. Nasty, horrible, bigoted, racist, terrible, terrible, Neanderthal Brits voting for Brexit to leave this wonderful EU structure sort of led by France. The epitome of just morality and joy and beauty. That seems to be the message we have for the last, how many years is it now? 7 years? It's felt like about 20. They're still going on about it. But interestingly, France yet again facing another night of riots. Not the first time, not the last time. These, of course, are over the killing by a police officer of a 17-year-old driver whose grandmother now has appealed for calm after rioters have taken to the streets for 6 nights. Police out in force in their tens of thousands after Emmanuel Macron ordered them to take back control of the streets, which they seem to be not yet able to do. Let's talk to Paris correspondent for The Times right now, David Chazan, who joins us again. Good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed. We understand it's been a slightly quieter night last night, maybe a Sunday night makes for a quieter night across some of the streets of French cities. But it's not just been in Paris. It was in Nanterre, the suburb of Paris, where this young man was shot dead by police after he drove away from a police stop. But we've seen it across the country, Marseille, Lyon, and other parts of the country. Police out in force on Champs-Élysées yesterday and around the Arc de Triomphe to try and prevent any disorder there. How successful have they been?
Well, they seem to be increasingly successful, moving in very quickly to stop trouble pretty fast after it started. They've been quite successful last night and the night before in Marseille, in Paris, as you were saying. So you might be right. Maybe the rioters are just growing tired. Maybe Sunday night, they took the night off, whatever. But I think for the second night running, we've seen what looks to be a significant lessening of the intensity of the violence and the vandalism and the looting that we've seen over the past 6 days. This all started last Tuesday. And so there's a tentative, and I stress the word tentative, sense of optimism here that the authorities are beginning to get a grip. You referred to the appeal by the 17-year-old who was allegedly killed by a police officer. His grandmother's appealed for calm. We've heard similar appeals for calm from rappers, social media influencers and sports stars, including Kylian Mbappé, the captain of the France football team. Maybe that's having an impact. But there's also a growing sense that families living in the deprived suburbs that have borne the brunt of the violence are just fed up with seeing their own neighbourhoods being smashed up.
And that's the thing, isn't it? We've seen this when you see the riots, when we see those August riots in London. What was it? It was back in 2011. And we've seen across America post BLM. You end up seeing, local people just trashing their own neighbourhoods, their local stores and the like. And it's them who end up losing out. But this is interesting. I mean, we're talking at 45,000 police special force officers, the equivalent of the SAS, being put onto the streets yesterday to try and, to basically sort of deter rioters. Some pretty nasty scenes in one town, a lit car being basically driven into the house of a local mayor. His wife and daughter were at home. Wife broke her leg, fleeing from the site. I mean, really quite scary stuff. There's no doubt at all. We've also seen, of course, shots fired at police officers. Thankfully, just minor injuries so far. And this isn't the first time. I mean, under Macron's rule, we, of course, only recently had those protests over the pensions changes. For once, an actual sensible policy from his government, but the way he pushed it through, sort of dictator style, is what people are objecting to. We had riots in the streets. We've seen, of course, the anti-lockdown riots. We saw the yellow vest riots as well. I mean, protests. This seems to be the norm. I mean, how much can we read into this as just, French people on the streets again, what a surprise? And how much of this is I suppose, a display of, the deep divides in French society, because something that a lot of the media seem to shy away from for the first few days of coverage of this is that, we are talking about largely, a white police force accused of, brutality and racism, and the killing of Nahel Mazouk, a 17-year-old child of French North African heritage. And actually, there is a very big issue between the immigrant population and the French police.
There's a huge issue, and there's a feeling even among third and fourth generation immigrants, particularly young people, that they face discrimination, they live in poor housing, they've got worse job prospects, and they're far more likely to be stopped and searched by the police. And if they are, they're far more likely to face police violence than white people. That's one thing. So this explosion of rage that we've seen from minority communities is very genuine. On the other hand, over the past 3 or 4 nights, what we've seen is a lot of looting and a lot of opportunistic mayhem. So I think while the anger is very genuine, the causes of those grievances may also be very genuine, but there is definitely an element involved here that's either criminal or just
opportunistic,
out, filled with adrenaline, and it's just a big thrill.
Yeah, well, the average age of those arrested is 17, which is quite telling, isn't it? But in terms of the political fallout for Emmanuel Macron, we saw the King Charles's first state visit was supposed to be to visit France, to visit. Macron is, of course, not just head of government, head of state there in France as well. That had to be called off because of those riots over pensions. This time, Macron's had to call off a trip that he was going to make to Germany because he needed to stay here and chair the oversee events, and he was chairing a big meeting in terms of the interior management yesterday. How damaging is it for him?
Well, there's a growing sense that trying to quell the rage on the streets is gobbling up every bit of the president's attention. Hence, he had to cancel the trip to Germany. There is definitely a feeling that the president really can't deal effectively with anything else at the moment. That may change if this trend continues and things continue to get quieter. But the president does seem to be struggling. We saw him on Friday and Saturday appealing to parents to keep their teenagers at home. Well, fine, but not a really good look for a head of state to have to do that. Yeah. And it makes it easy for the far left and the far right, who are the main opposition to the centrist president in France now, to say, look, he hasn't got any ideas. He doesn't know what to do.
And seen as out of touch as well, elitist and out of touch.
Yeah, he is. He's an intellectual. He sometimes has rather a haughty manner, and he's often been accused of being completely out of touch with ordinary people's everyday concerns. I'm not sure that's a justified criticism. I think it's more that he has an unfortunate manner and people find him condescending.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's up for election again, so he's probably okay on that front, isn't he? Really good to get your thoughts. David Shazan, Paris correspondent at The Times. Thank you very much indeed for that.